The rules were simple. Keep your head down, keep your mouth shut, and never, under any circumstances, speak to the Lichen King. Sarah repeated them like a prayer as she followed the other tribute girls through the castle gates. 12 of them in total, pulled from villages across the conquered territories to serve in the king's household. Payment for peace, the soldiers had called it. A tithe of young women to cook and clean and do whatever else the beast on the throne demanded. Sarah knew what that meant. She'd heard the stories. The Lichen King was ancient and cruel, a monster who had united the wolf packs through bloodshed and terror. Women who displeased him disappeared. Women who caught his eye fared worse. So she would be invisible. She was good at that. The head of household, a severe woman named Lady Maren, lined them up in the entrance hall for inspection. Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the floor, her hands clasped in front of her breathing shallow and quiet. She had learned long ago how to make herself small, how to fade into the background until people forgot she existed. It was the only way to survive. "You will not speak unless spoken to by your direct superiors," Lady Maren announced, pacing before them. "You will not enter the royal wing without explicit permission. You will not look at members of the court. And above all else—" She paused, and Sarah felt the weight of her gaze. "You will never address His Majesty directly. If he enters a room, you bow and leave. If he speaks in your presence, you remain silent. Is that understood?" A murmur of assent from the other girls. Sarah said nothing. Speaking would draw attention, and attention was dangerous. "You!" Lady Maren stopped in front of her. "Did you hear me?" Sarah nodded, still not looking up. "I asked you a question. Answer it." "Yes, my lady." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "I understand." A long pause. Then Lady Maren moved on, and Sarah allowed herself to breathe. The first week passed in a blur of exhaustion. Sarah was assigned to the kitchens, which suited her perfectly. It was hot, grueling work, peeling vegetables, scrubbing pots, hauling water from the well, but it kept her far from the royal wing and the dangerous eyes of the court. The other tribute girls whispered at night about the Lichen King. Some had caught glimpses of him. They described a giant of a man, dark-haired and golden-eyed, with a presence that made the air feel heavy. One girl claimed she'd seen him shift, his body twisting into something massive and terrifying. Another said he'd executed a servant for spilling wine on his boots. Sarah listened and said nothing. The less she knew about the king, the better. She had no intention of ever being close enough to find out if the stories were true. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. It happened on her 8th day at the castle. Sarah had been sent to deliver a tray of refreshments to the council chamber, a task that should have been simple. The meeting was supposed to have ended an hour ago. The room was supposed to be empty. It wasn't. She pushed open the door with her shoulder, the heavy tray balanced in her arms, and froze. The Lichen King sat alone at the head of the great table, surrounded by maps and documents. He looked up when she entered, and their eyes met before she could remember to look away. Golden. His eyes were golden, like molten honey, like sunlight through amber, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that made her forget how to move. Bow and leave. Bow and leave. Bow and leave. But her body wouldn't obey. She stood there, trapped in his gaze, the tray trembling in her hands. He was enormous. Even seated, she could tell he towered over ordinary men. His shoulders were broad, his arms thick with muscle, his dark hair falling past his collar in waves. Everything about him radiated power. contained, controlled, but undeniably present. And he was looking at her like he'd never seen a woman before. "You're new." His voice broke the spell, deep and rough, like stones grinding together. Sierra's legs nearly buckled. He had spoken to her. The king had spoken to her. She wasn't supposed to respond. She wasn't supposed to even be here. She needed to put down the tray and leave and pray he forgot her face. "I asked you a question." Oh, God. She had to answer. Not answering a direct question from the king was surely worse than speaking to him. "Yes, Your Majesty." The words came out strangled. "I arrived 8 days ago, with the tribute group." She kept her eyes on the floor now, too late, her heart pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. A long silence. Then the scrape of a chair. He was standing. He was walking toward her. Sarah stopped breathing entirely. His boots entered her field of vision. Black leather, polished to a shine. He stopped less than 2 feet away, and she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell something wild and woodsy that made her head spin. "Look at me." A command, one she couldn't disobey. Slowly, terrified, she raised her eyes. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. Sharp jaw, high cheekbones, a face that might have been carved from stone. But it was his eyes that held her, those golden eyes that seemed to see straight through her skin to something beneath. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sira, Your Majesty." "Sera." He said it slowly, like he was tasting each letter. "You're afraid of me." It wasn't a question. She nodded anyway, unable to lie. Something flickered in his expression. Not anger, something softer, almost like pain. "They told you not to speak to me," he said. "Didn't they?" "Yes, Your Majesty." "And yet here you are, speaking to me." Sira's throat tightened. "You spoke to me first. I didn't know what else to do." For a moment, he simply stared at her. Then, impossibly, the corner of his mouth twitched. "No," he murmured. "I don't suppose you did." He reached out, and she flinched. An instinctive reaction, born from years of learning that hands meant pain. But he only took the tray from her grip, his fingers brushing hers in the process. The touch sent a jolt through her entire body. Electric, alive, like nothing she had ever felt. His eyes widened slightly. He had felt it too. "Go," he said, his voice rougher than before. "Return to your duties." Sarah didn't need to be told twice. She bobbed a clumsy curtsy and fled, her heart racing, her skin still tingling where he had touched her. She made it halfway down the corridor before his voice reached her again, impossibly clear, despite the distance. "Sarah?" She stopped, turned. He stood in the doorway of the council chamber, watching her with those golden eyes. "I'll be speaking to you again," he said. It sounded like a promise, or maybe a warning. Then he turned and disappeared back into the room, leaving Sarah alone in the corridor with her pounding heart and a single terrifying thought. The king had noticed her, and something told her that her days of being invisible were over. He kept his promise. Over the following days, the king appeared everywhere Sarah went. In the kitchens when she was hauling water, in the corridors when she was carrying linens, in the gardens when she slipped outside for a moment of quiet air. At first, she told herself it was coincidence. The castle was large, but the king had business in every corner of it. Their paths were bound to cross occasionally. But then she noticed the way his eyes found her the moment he entered a room. The way he lingered when she was present, dismissing advisers and guards as if their concerns could wait. The way he always seemed to position himself where she would have to pass by him. He was hunting her, not with violence, but with presence, with attention, and it terrified her. The other servants noticed too. The whispers started within the week. Sierra heard them in the dormitory at night, felt the weight of suspicious glances during meals. The tribute girls who had arrived with her began keeping their distance, as if whatever had caught the king's eye might be contagious. Only Lady Maren addressed it directly. "You," she said, cornering Sarah in the pantry one evening. "What have you done?" "Nothing, my lady, I swear it. The king has requested you be reassigned." Lady Maren's voice was tight with barely contained fury. "You are to serve in the royal wing, his personal household." Sierra's stomach dropped. "No, please. I haven't done anything wrong." "I don't care what you have or haven't done." Lady Maren seized her arm, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "Whatever game you're playing, whatever tricks you've used to catch his attention, it ends now. Do you understand? The king is not for the likes of you. You are nothing. A tribute. A body sent to pay your village's debt." "I'm not playing any game," Sarah whispered. "I don't want his attention. I don't want any of this." Lady Maren studied her face for a long moment. Whatever she saw there made some of the anger drain from her expression, replaced by something that looked almost like pity. "Then you're a fool," she said quietly, "because you have it whether you want it or not. Report to the royal wing tomorrow at dawn, and pray to whatever gods you believe in that his interest fades quickly." She released Sarah's arm and walked away, leaving Sarah alone in the pantry with her racing heart and trembling hands. The royal wing was nothing like the servants' quarters. Where Sarah had grown accustomed to narrow corridors and cramped dormitories, this was all soaring ceilings and polished marble. Tapestries that probably cost more than her entire village earned in a decade. Her new room, private, impossibly, had a real bed with feather pillows and a window that overlooked the mountain range to the north. She didn't sleep that first night. She sat on the edge of the bed, waiting for the door to open, waiting for the king to appear and claim what men like him always claimed from women like her. He didn't come. The second night, she dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every sound. Still, he didn't come. On the third day, he found her in the small library adjoining the royal chambers. She had been dusting the shelves, her assigned duty, though she suspected it was an excuse to keep her nearby, when his voice came from the doorway. "You haven't been sleeping?" Sierra spun around, nearly dropping her cloth. He stood there in simple clothes, no crown, no formal attire. He looked almost ordinary, almost human, except for those eyes, those golden, ancient eyes that saw too much. "I'm fine, Your Majesty." "You're lying." He stepped into the room, and she instinctively stepped back. He noticed. She saw the flicker of something painful cross his face, but he didn't advance further. "You think I brought you here to hurt you?" It wasn't a question. Sarah didn't answer. "I'm not going to touch you," he said quietly. "Not unless you ask me to. Not unless you want me to." "Then why am I here?" The words came out before she could stop them. Too bold. Too direct. She braced for anger. Instead, he sighed. It was such a human sound that it caught her off guard. "Because I can't stay away from you." He ran a hand through his dark hair, and for a moment he looked less like a fearsome king and more like a man struggling with something he didn't understand. "I've tried. Believe me, I've tried. But every time I'm in a room and you're not there, I feel like I'm missing something essential, like I can't breathe properly until I see you again. Sarah stared at him. That doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm 342 years old. I've ruled this kingdom for 2 centuries. I've fought wars, killed enemies, built an empire, and in all that time, I've never felt anything like what I feel when I look at you. Her heart was pounding. What do you feel? Like I've been waiting for you. His voice dropped. Like you're the answer to a question I didn't know I was asking. Sierra shook her head. I'm nobody. I'm a tribute from a conquered village. You're my mate. The words hung in the air between them. I knew it the moment I saw you, the moment our eyes met. Everything in me recognized you. That's impossible. I thought so too. He took one step closer, just one, and stopped. I've spent centuries believing I didn't have a mate, that I was destined to rule alone. And then you walked into my council chamber with a tray of refreshments, and my entire world shifted. Sierra's back hit the bookshelf. She hadn't realized she'd been retreating. You can't just decide I'm your mate. You don't even know me. You're right. His expression softened. I don't. Which is why I'm not asking for anything except the chance to change that. Talk to me. Let me know you. Let me prove that I'm not the monster the stories say I am. And if you are, if you're exactly what the stories say, then you leave. He said it simply, like it cost him nothing. But she saw the tension in his jaw, the way his hands clenched at his sides. I'll give you gold, horses, an escort to wherever you want to go. You'll never see me again. Sarah studied his face, searching for the lie, for the trap. Men in power didn't make offers like this. They took what they wanted and discarded what they didn't. But she found nothing except sincerity. And underneath it, something that looked almost like fear. He was afraid she would say no. One conversation, she heard herself say. That's all I'm agreeing to. The tension drained from his shoulders. One conversation, I'll take it. He gestured to a pair of chairs by the window, and after a moment's hesitation, she sat. He took the chair across from her, leaving a careful distance between them. Tell me about your village, he said. Tell me about your life before you came here. So she did. Haltingly at first, then with growing ease. She told him about the river that ran behind her family's cottage, about her mother who had died when she was young, about her father who had tried his best but never quite recovered from the loss. She told him about the day the soldiers came, about being chosen as tribute, about the terror of the journey to the castle. He listened without interrupting. His golden eyes never left her face, but there was no hunger in them, only attention, only care. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Thank you, he said finally, for trusting me with that. Sierra blinked. No one had ever thanked her for talking about herself. No one had ever acted like her words were a gift worth receiving. Something shifted in her chest, a tiny crack in the wall she'd built around herself. She didn't trust it, didn't trust him. But for the first time since arriving at this castle, she thought that maybe, just maybe, she wanted to. One conversation became 2, then 5, then more than Sarah could count. Every evening, after her duties were finished, the king, Kalen, he'd asked her to call him, though the name still felt strange on her tongue, would find her in the library. They would sit by the window as the sun set over the mountains, and they would talk. He told her about his childhood, centuries ago, when the lichen packs were scattered and warring, about his father, a brutal alpha who had beaten weakness out of his sons with fists and fury, about his mother, a gentle woman who had died trying to protect him from one of those beatings, about the decades of war it had taken to unite the packs, the blood on his hands, the crown he had never wanted but couldn't refuse. "They call me a monster," he said one evening, his voice distant. "And they're not wrong. I've done monstrous things. Killed men who probably didn't deserve to die, raised villages that defied me, built my kingdom on bones." Sarah watched the firelight play across his face. "Do you regret it?" "Some of it. Not all." He met her eyes. "I regret the innocents who suffered, but I don't regret creating a world where my people can live without fear, where children aren't slaughtered in territorial disputes, where women aren't—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "Aren't what?" "Aren't treated as prizes to be won or punishments to be endured." His voice was rough. "The tribute system. I inherited it from my father. I've been trying to dismantle it for decades, but the old alphas resist. They see it as their right." Sarah's breath caught. "You're trying to end it?" "I am ending it. Your group was the last. I've already sent word to the territories. No more tributes. Any alpha who defies the order will answer to me personally." She stared at him. All this time, she had assumed the tribute system was his doing, his cruelty. Instead, he had been fighting against it, working to spare other girls from the fate she had feared. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Would you have believed me?" He smiled, but it was sad. "You came here expecting a monster. I didn't want to convince you with words. I wanted to show you with actions." Something cracked inside Sarah's chest, the last remnants of the wall she had built, crumbling under the weight of who he actually was. "You're not what I expected," she whispered. "Neither are you." The nightmares started that same week. Sarah had always had them. Fragments of her mother's death, her father's grief, the soldiers who had dragged her from her home. But they had been manageable. Quiet terrors she could swallow upon waking. Now they were worse, vivid, inescapable. She would dream of Kalen's golden eyes turning cold, his gentle hands becoming cruel, his soft voice hardening into commands she couldn't refuse. She would wake gasping, drenched in sweat, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. On the fifth night, she woke to find him standing in her doorway. "I heard you screaming," he said quietly. "Through the walls?" Sarah pulled the blankets up to her chin, shame flooding her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disturb." "Don't." He took a step into the room, then stopped, as if remembering his promise not to come closer without permission. "Don't apologize. Tell me what's wrong." "It's nothing. Just dreams." "Dreams that make you scream don't come from nothing." His voice was gentle but firm. "Talk to me, Sarah. Please." Maybe it was the hour. Maybe it was the way he stood there, so careful not to crowd her, so desperate to help. Maybe it was the weeks of conversations that had slowly peeled away her defenses. "Whatever the reason," she told him. She told him about the dreams, about how they had started hopeful, the two of them walking together, talking, laughing, and then twisted into something dark, about how Dream Kalen would grab her wrist and squeeze until she heard bones crack, about how he would laugh at her attempts to escape, tell her she had always been nothing but prey. "I know it's not real," she finished, her voice breaking. "I know you're not like that." but my mind won't stop waiting for you to become the monster everyone said you were." Kalen was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he crossed the room and knelt beside her bed. Not touching, just close. "I'm going to tell you something," he said, "and I need you to hear it. Really hear it." She nodded, tears blurring her vision. "You spent your whole life being told that men with power will use it to hurt you, that you're not safe, that your only option is to be small and quiet and hope they don't notice you." His golden eyes held hers, fierce and bright. "And then you were taken from your home and sent to a lichen king's castle, and every fear you ever had seemed justified." "Yes," she whispered. "Those fears kept you alive. They're not weakness, they're survival." "But Sarah—" He reached out, slowly, and took her hand. She let him. "You're safe now. I will never hurt you. I will never force you. I will never become the monster in your dreams." "How can you promise that?" "Because hurting you would be like hurting myself." His thumb traced circles on her palm, gentle as a prayer. "You're my mate, my heart, the other half of my soul. I would sooner cut off my own hand than use it against you." The tears spilled over. She couldn't stop them. Years of fear and tension and waiting for the blow to fall. And here was this ancient, powerful king kneeling at her bedside, promising her safety like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I don't know how to stop being afraid," she admitted. "Then let me be patient." He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Let me prove it to you, night after night, until your heart believes what your mind already knows." "And if it takes years?" "Then it takes years." He smiled, and it was the softest thing she had ever seen. "I've waited centuries for you. I can wait a little longer for your trust." She didn't know who moved first. Maybe she leaned forward. Maybe he rose to meet her. But suddenly his face was inches from hers, his breath warm on her lips, his eyes asking a question. "May I?" he whispered. She should have said no, should have pulled back, maintained the distance, protected what was left of her walls. Instead, she closed the gap herself. The kiss was gentle, tentative. His lips brushed hers, like he was afraid she might shatter. But beneath the gentleness was something fierce, something barely restrained. And when she pressed closer, a sound escaped his throat that was almost a growl. He pulled back first. His eyes were blazing gold, his breathing ragged, his hands trembling where they cupped her face. "If we don't stop now," he said, his voice strained, "I won't be able to." Sarah nodded, equally breathless. Her lips tingled. Her whole body tingled. "Good night, Sarah." He pressed one more kiss to her forehead, lingering, reverent. "Dream of me, the real me." Then he was gone, and she was alone with her racing heart and a single, overwhelming realization. She was falling in love with him. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the fall. The summons came 3 days later. Sarah was in the library, reorganizing shelves that didn't need reorganizing, when a guard appeared in the doorway. His face was carefully blank. "The council requests your presence in the Great Hall," he said. "Immediately." Her stomach twisted. In 2 months at the castle, she had never been summoned to the Great Hall, had never been acknowledged by the council at all. She was a tribute girl, a servant, a nobody. Unless something had changed. She followed the guard through corridors that grew increasingly grand until they reached the massive double doors of the Great Hall. He pushed them open, and Sarah stepped inside. The hall was full. Nobles lined the walls, their faces a mixture of curiosity and contempt. At the far end, on a raised dais, the council sat in high-backed chairs, 7 men and women who advised the king on matters of state. Lady Maren stood among them, her expression coldly triumphant. And in the centre of it all, Calen sat on his throne. His face was stone. His golden eyes found hers the moment she entered, and she saw something flash in them, warning, apology, barely contained fury, before his expression smoothed into royal neutrality. "Approach," Lady Maren commanded. Sarah walked forward on legs that felt like water. The silence pressed against her from all sides, heavy with judgment. When she reached the foot of the dais, she stopped and curtsied, keeping her eyes down. "This is the girl." One of the councilmen, an elderly alpha with silver hair and cold eyes, leaned forward. "This is the tribute who has been occupying His Majesty's attention?" "Yes, Lord Aldrich." Lady Maren's voice dripped with satisfaction. "A peasant from the Eastern Territories. No family of consequence. No breeding. No value whatsoever except as a kitchen maid." Sera's cheeks burned, but she kept her head down. "Your Majesty." Lord Aldrich turned to Calen. "You must see how this looks. The king, dallying with a human tribute? It's unseemly. It undermines your authority. The other packs are already whispering." "Let them whisper." Calen's voice was flat, dangerous. "With respect, sire, we cannot afford dissent. The abolition of the tribute system has already caused unrest among the traditional alphas. If they believe you've gone soft, corrupted by a human girl..." "Choose your next words carefully, Aldrich." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Lord Aldrich paled, but pressed on. "We are not suggesting anything improper, Your Majesty. We simply believe it would be best for the kingdom if the girl were returned to her village, before any further attachment develops." Returned. The word hit Sarah like a physical blow. They wanted to send her away, to tear her from Calen's side and pretend none of this had ever happened. Part of her, the old part, the fearful part, whispered that maybe they were right. She was a peasant, a nobody. She had no place beside a king. If she left now, she could return to her quiet life, her invisible existence. She could be safe again. But safe from what? From love. From the man who had knelt at her bedside and promised to wait for her trust? From the first real happiness she had ever known. The girl has not been asked her preference. Calen's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. "Perhaps we should hear what she wants." Every eye in the room turned to her. Sera's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Well," Lady Maren's smile was sharp as a blade. "What do you want, tribute girl? To stay here and endure the scorn of the court? Or to return to your village with enough gold to live comfortably for the rest of your days?" Sera raised her head. She looked at the council, at their smug certainty that she would choose the easy path. She looked at Lady Maren, who had never seen her as anything more than an inconvenience. She looked at the nobles lining the walls, their faces twisted with disdain for the peasant girl who had dared to catch their king's attention. And then she looked at Calen. His mask had slipped. She could see the fear beneath it, fear that she would leave, that she would choose safety over him, that he would lose her to the cruelty of his own court. He was gripping the arms of his throne so tightly his knuckles had gone white. He had given her a choice, a real choice, just as he'd promised. He wasn't commanding her to stay, wasn't using his power to force her hand. He was waiting, terrified, for her to decide. And in that moment, Sarah realized something. She wasn't the scared girl who had arrived at this castle 2 months ago. She wasn't the tribute who kept her head down and her mouth shut and prayed not to be noticed. Kaelin had seen her, truly seen her, and in his eyes she had discovered someone worth seeing, someone brave enough to choose. "I want to stay." Her voice rang out clear and strong, surprising even herself. "I want to stay with my mate." Gasps rippled through the hall. Lady Marin's face went white. "Your mate?" Lord Aldrich sputtered. "You dare to claim—" "She claims nothing." Kaelin rose from his throne, and suddenly the room felt very small. "I claim her. Before this council, before this court, before every wolf in my kingdom, I claim Sera of the Eastern Territories as my fated mate, my equal, my queen." Silence. Absolute, deafening silence. Then Kaelin descended from the dais, his eyes never leaving Sera's face. He stopped in front of her, so close she could feel the heat of his body, and took her hands in his. "I should have done this sooner," he said quietly, for her ears alone. "I should have declared you the moment I knew. Forgive me for letting them make you doubt." "There's nothing to forgive." She squeezed his hands. "I needed to choose for myself. I needed to know I could. And now you know." "Now I know." He kissed her then, in front of the entire court. Not a gentle kiss, not a tentative one. This was a claiming, fierce and possessive and unmistakably final. His arms wrapped around her waist, lifting her against him, and she melted into him like she had been waiting her whole life for this moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, she saw that his eyes had gone full gold. His wolf was close to the surface, barely contained. And when he spoke again, his voice was rough with something primal. "Anyone who questions my mate's place at my side questions me." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Anyone who disrespects her disrespects their king. And anyone who attempts to harm her or drive her away will answer to my wolf." He turned to face the council, one arm still firmly around Sera's waist. "Is that understood?" One by one, the council members bowed their heads. Even Lord Aldrich, even Lady Marin, though her face was twisted with barely concealed fury. "Good." Kaelin's voice softened. "Then this matter is closed. My mate and I have a wedding to plan." He led her from the great hall, past the bowing nobles and the stunned servants and the guards who stepped aside without a word. It wasn't until they reached the privacy of the royal wing that Sera let herself breathe. "A wedding?" she managed. Kaelin's fierce expression melted into something warm, almost boyish. "If you'll have me." Sera laughed, a real laugh, free and bright. "I just declared you my mate in front of your entire court. I think we're past if." He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. "Then say yes. Say you'll be my queen. Say you'll spend the rest of your life letting me prove I'm worthy of you." "Yes." The word came easily, naturally, like it had been waiting on her lips all along. "Yes. 1,000 times, yes." He kissed her again, softer this time, full of promise. And Sera knew, with absolute certainty, that she had finally found where she belonged. The wedding took place on the night of the full moon, as was Lycan tradition. Sera stood at the entrance to the great hall, the same hall where she had faced down the council just 3 weeks before, and tried to remember how to breathe. Her gown was silver silk, embroidered with tiny wolves that seemed to run and leap in the candlelight. A crown of white winter roses rested on her hair. She looked like a queen. She still couldn't quite believe she was about to become one. Ready? The voice came from beside her. She turned to find one of the other tribute girls, Mira, who had arrived at the castle the same day as Sarah, watching her with wide eyes. In the weeks since Kaelin's declaration, everything had changed. The tribute girls who had once avoided Sarah now looked at her with something like awe. The servants who had whispered behind her back now bowed when she passed. Even Lady Maren had been conspicuously absent from the royal wing, reassigned to oversee the castle's distant farming estates. Kaelin's doing. He hadn't told Sarah directly, but she had seen the orders on his desk. Lady Maren would spend the rest of her career counting sheep and managing grain stores in the Northern Territories. A fitting punishment for a woman who had spent years tormenting vulnerable girls. "I'm ready," Sarah said. And she meant it. The doors swung open. The great hall was transformed. Thousands of candles floated in the air. Some lichen magic Sarah didn't fully understand, casting everything in warm, golden light. Nobles and pack leaders lined the walls, their earlier contempt replaced by careful neutrality. At the far end of the hall, beneath an arch of woven branches, Kaelin waited. He was dressed in black and silver, his dark hair brushed back from his face, his golden eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart stutter. When he saw her, his expression shifted, from nervous anticipation to something softer, something like wonder. She walked toward him alone, no one to give her away, no family to stand beside her. But she didn't feel alone. She felt powerful. She had chosen this. Every step she took was a declaration. I am not nothing. I am not invisible. I am worthy of love. When she reached the arch, Kaelin took her hands. His fingers were trembling slightly, and somehow that small sign of vulnerability made her love him even more. You're beautiful, he murmured, too low for anyone else to hear. You're shaking. I've been waiting 300 years for this moment. His lips quirked. I think I'm allowed to be nervous. The ceremony was conducted by an ancient priestess, her words a blend of the old tongue and the common language. Sarah understood only pieces of it, promises of loyalty, of protection, of souls intertwined. But she felt the weight of every vow. When it came time for Kaelin to speak, he turned to face her fully. I spent centuries building a kingdom, he said. I thought that was my purpose, my legacy. But standing here now, looking at you, I realize I was wrong. His voice dropped, rough with emotion. You are my purpose. You are my legacy. Every battle I fought, every year I survived, was just the universe keeping me alive long enough to find you. Tears pricked Sarah's eyes. She blinked them back. I was told not to speak to you, she said when it was her turn. I was told to be invisible, to be small, to expect nothing and want nothing. And then you spoke to me first, and everything changed. She squeezed his hands. You saw me when no one else did. You chose me when I couldn't even choose myself. I don't have centuries of battles or a kingdom to offer you, but I have my heart, all of it, for as long as I live. Forever, he corrected softly. Mate bonds transcend lifetimes. You'll have me forever. Forever, then? The priestess spoke the final words, and Kaelin pulled her into his arms. The kiss was deep and claiming, a seal on everything they had promised. When they broke apart, the hall erupted in howls, the lichen way of celebrating, wild and joyous and utterly overwhelming. Sarah laughed against Kaelin's chest, and he held her tighter. My queen, he whispered into her hair. My mate. My heart. My king, she whispered back. my choice, my home. The feast lasted until dawn. Sarah danced with pack leaders who had once looked down on her, accepted congratulations from nobles who had called for her exile, smiled until her cheeks ached. Through it all, Caelan never left her side. His hand rested on her waist, her back, her shoulder, always touching, always claiming, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. When they finally retired to their chambers, Sarah expected exhaustion. Instead, she felt alive, buzzing with energy and joy and something deeper. "I have something for you," Caelan said. He crossed to his desk and returned with a letter, the seal already broken. "This arrived yesterday," he said. "From your village?" Sarah's heart clenched. She hadn't thought about her village in weeks, hadn't allowed herself to. Her father had let her go without a fight, accepting the soldier's coin without meeting her eyes. She had told herself she didn't care. She had been lying. She took the letter with trembling hands and read. "Daughter, word has reached us of your marriage to the Lycan king. The entire village is in shock. The soldiers who took you away now bow when they pass our cottage, as if your rise in fortune has somehow elevated us as well. Your stepmother is furious. She had hoped to use the tribute gold to secure a match for her own daughter, and now she must watch as the girl she treated as a servant becomes a queen. I confess I find some satisfaction in her displeasure. I should have fought for you. I should have refused to let them take you. I was weak, and I will regret that weakness until my dying day. But if you have found happiness, then perhaps some good has come from my failure. I am proud of you, Sarah, prouder than I have any right to be. Your father." Sarah read the letter twice. Then she folded it carefully and set it aside. "Are you all right?" Caelan asked. "Yes." She smiled and found that she meant it. "I think I finally am." 2 years later, Sarah stood on the balcony of the royal chambers, watching the sun rise over the mountains. The kingdom had changed in her time as queen. The tribute system was fully abolished. Human villages were no longer conquered territories, but protected allies. The old alphas who had resisted Caelan's reforms had been replaced by younger wolves who understood that strength didn't require cruelty. And Sarah herself had changed most of all. The girl who had arrived at this castle with nothing, no family, no voice, no hope, had become a woman who sat in council meetings and advocated for the vulnerable, who visited villages and listened to the concerns of common people, who had found her voice and learned to use it. Arms wrapped around her from behind, and she leaned back into Caelan's warmth. "You're up early," he murmured against her neck. "Couldn't sleep." She smiled. "I was thinking about the day we met. How terrified I was. How certain I was that you would destroy me. And now?" She turned in his arms to face him. The morning light caught his golden eyes, and she marveled, as she always did, at the love she found there. "Now I know the truth," she said. "You didn't destroy me. You helped me find myself. I love you." He said it simply, the way he always did, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I love you too." She rose on her toes and kissed him softly. "My king, my mate, my home." He pulled her closer, and she melted into him, this man who had spoken to her when she was forbidden to speak, who had seen her when she was invisible, who had chosen her when she had nothing. She had been warned not to speak to the king. She was so glad he had spoken first. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like and subscribe for more Lycan King romances. Leave a comment telling us your favorite part, and check out our other stories for more fated mates, happily ever afters, and love that defies all odds.